What's the worst? Thank God we broke up moment you only understood after leaving them. Story 1. I didn't really get how bad my relationship with Kyle was until I tried to buy an apartment by myself. We'd broken up 6 months earlier. Nothing dramatic, just years of small things. Him forgetting to pay his half of bills, using my car because his was always in the shop. Me doing the mental gymnastics of, well, he's just bad with money, but he's sweet. At the bank, the loan officer was super friendly at first. We went through my income, savings, credit score, then his eyebrows slowly climbed his forehead. Have you had any recent issues with missed payments? He asked. No, I said. I'm neurotic about autopay. Why? He spun his monitor toward me. There was a list of accounts I didn't recognize. 3 different credit cards, a store card, and a personal loan. All maxed, all in my name, all opened in the last 3 years. My stomach dropped. I actually laughed at first because I had to be reading it wrong. Then I saw the address attached to the accounts, our old apartment, and the little checkbox. Authorized by phone. Verification code. My birthday. It was like feeling someone rearrange the furniture in your memories. The, oh yeah, I'll grab the mail later. The way he freaked out if I went into the junk drawer where we kept old bills. The, I'll handle the internet nonsense. The loan officer quietly left to give me a minute. I sat there in this glass office, fluorescent lights buzzing, realizing my ex hadn't been bad with money. He'd been using my name as a credit sponge while waxing poetic about our future. Later that night, I called him. I wasn't even angry at first, just weirdly calm. I told him I'd found the accounts, that I was filing a police report and talking to a lawyer. He didn't apologize. Not once. He went straight to, if you ruin my credit, I'll never be able to get back on my feet. You know I've always struggled. You owe me for supporting you when you were in school. That line hit harder than the debt. I'd worked 2 jobs during school. He'd supported me by smoking weed on our couch and driving my car to his friends' houses. I hung up on him mid-guilt trip. We're still fighting through the fraud paperwork and legal crap. But walking out of that bank, I had this crystal clear thought. If we hadn't broken up, those our future accounts would have been a joint mortgage, joint loans, joint bankruptcy. Instead, it's just my name, my mess, and my life finally, without him attached like a financial parasite. I didn't get my loan that day, but I walked out weirdly relieved. I didn't dodge a red flag, I dodged a wrecking ball. Story 2. My thank God we broke up moment happened while I was wearing a bridesmaid dress. My ex, Mark, was the groom. Yeah. We dated in college, lived together for 2 years, and I really thought he was it. Then I found a flirty message thread with, just a friend. And he convinced me I was overreacting, jealous, crazy. I dumped him anyway because my gut wouldn't shut up. But I left that relationship thinking, maybe I ruined something good because I'm paranoid. Fast forward 4 years. He's marrying my friend Jenna. Long story short, different circles collided, they met at a party, and when she found out Mark and I used to date, I did the mature thing. I said, we weren't compatible, but he's not evil. If you're happy, I'm happy. Cut to the reception. The DJ announces it's time for the special video. It's supposed to be cute clips of them as kids, photos of them dating, cheesy transitions, the usual. But the video that starts playing is not that. It's a screen recording. You see someone open Instagram DMs. The username at the top, Mark Wabuai. The messages are from 3 days before the wedding. You know I still think about you. One last night before I'm locked down. No one has to know. Then it cuts to Snapchat. Different girl. Same vibe. Then to a folder of screenshots of Tinder matches. Timestamps from the month he proposed. At first people laughed, thinking it was some weird bachelor party joke. Then the room started to go quiet. You could hear Jenna's mom whisper, "Is this real?" Mark lost it. He ran to the DJ booth yelling to stop the video. But whoever put it together had locked the file. It kept going. The last slide was a black screen with white text. Jenna, you deserve better. Check his phone. A girl who didn't believe him either. The lights came up. Jenna was already gone. Bridesmaids looking for her. Mark arguing with her dad. People murmuring like it was a live-action subreddit. And I just stood there, completely still, my champagne glass shaking in my hand. Because I recognized some of those screenshots. Same phrases. Same excuses. Same late night, "You're the only one who gets me." I'd spent years wondering if I'd been dramatic. If emotional cheating was even real. If my boundaries were too strict. Watching that video, with 150 people seeing exactly who he was, I felt this insane wave of validation and nausea at the same time. He had escalated. What used to be shady messages while we dated had turned into full-blown serial cheating during his engagement. I found out later the video was made by one of his current side pieces who stumbled on the wedding website. She reached out to others, they compared timelines, and decided to blow it up rather than let Jenna sign papers with him. Jenna never walked back into that reception. The wedding legally happened. They'd already signed to make things easier with the venue. But the marriage didn't survive the week. And me? I went home, deleted our old pictures for good and slept like a rock. Turns out I didn't ruin something good. I bailed out of a building before it collapsed. Someone else just got stuck inside long enough to pull the fire alarm. Story 3. My parents split when I was 10. Back then, if you'd asked me, I would have told you it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. My dad was fun parent. Late bedtimes, junk food, presents he couldn't afford. Mom was mean parent. Chores, homework, rules, the whole, we can't buy that because we have bills speech. So when Dad told me Mom was trying to take me away from him, I believed him. The custody battle dragged on for years. Dad would cry in front of me, say things like, if the judge sends you to live with your mother full-time, I don't know what I'll do. I might not even be here anymore. Try hearing that at 12 and not having your brain scrambled. At 16, the court finally decided I was old enough to give my preference. Everyone kept telling me I was allowed to choose. It sounded empowering, but really it was just a heavier guilt backpack. On the day of the hearing, I was in this gross beige hallway with my mom on one bench and my dad pacing on the other. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in a month. Dad looked angry. Not sad, angry. Mom's lawyer came out and asked to speak to me alone. My dad immediately jumped in. Why? What are you trying to turn her against me about now? The lawyer calmly handed him some papers. Because of this, she said. It was a printout of text messages. I recognized my own number at the top. Underneath were messages I'd supposedly sent my dad. Mom says you're useless. I hate living with her. I wish you'd just take me and disappear. Except, I never wrote those. They traced back to an app that lets you spoof texts and send them to yourself to save as proof. The account was set up with my dad's email. He'd been using fake messages from me to convince the court that I was miserable with my mom and desperate to live with him. Full-time. So he wouldn't have to pay child support. Something snapped in my brain. All the fun weekends where he'd pump me for information about mom's job. The jokes about her being money-hungry. The guilt trips. The suicidal comments. They all rearranged into one ugly picture. I wasn't a kid he loved. I was leverage. In the hearing, the judge asked where I wanted to live. For years, I'd rehearsed some diplomatic answer. Instead, I said very clearly, I want to live with my mom. And I don't feel safe with my dad anymore. My dad's face went blank. Then he called me brainwashed in open court. That was the last day I spoke to him in person. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if my mom hadn't found those fake texts in disclosure. I would have kept chasing his approval, thinking I was betraying him by having a good time at mom's. Now I'm in college, living with my mom part-time when I'm home, and she's relaxed. She laughs more. She's not constantly putting out emotional fires. I used to wish my parents had stayed together for me. Standing in that hallway, realizing my own father forged my words to avoid paying for my life, I had my moment. Thank God they broke up. He didn't lose a wife. He lost his favorite bargaining chip. Story 4. I dated my coworker Lily for 3 months. It was one of those intense office flings, staying late together, to finish the report, inside jokes on Slack, takeout at her place because it's closer to work. She was charming and sharp and had this way of making everything feel urgent. When we broke up, it was mostly because I got tired of the constant drama. She always had a crisis. Her landlord, her last ex, her toxic manager, her family owing her money. Every story had the same pattern. Lily, the victim, and some unreasonable authority figure ruining her life. I told myself I was being unfair, that trauma makes people messy, but I ended it anyway. We stayed professional but distant. She started dating someone in another department a few months later, and I mentally filed her under good person, just not compatible. A year after our breakup, I got an email from HR. You've been identified as someone who may have relevant information regarding an ongoing investigation. I assumed it was about some restructuring. Showed up to the meeting with zero anxiety. They shut the door, pulled out a folder and said Lily's name. My stomach dropped. Turns out her new boyfriend had filed a complaint. So had her previous manager at another company. And, this is where my jaw actually hit the floor, so had 2 of my own male coworkers. The pattern. Lily would start something consensual. Then the second she didn't get what she wanted, a promotion, a reference, expensive gifts, she'd threaten to go to HR and say she'd been coerced. One guy had proof. Screenshots of texts where she literally wrote, if you don't at least help me get moved into your department, I'm going to tell HR you pressured me into this. The company took it seriously, obviously. They pulled old messages, talked to exes, did the whole investigation. Then they showed me a screenshot from me, or at least from my account. It was a Slack message to her from last year. We should keep this quiet. I don't want people thinking I forced you into anything. I never wrote that. The timestamp was during a meeting where my calendar and badge said I was in a client office across town. IT checked. It came from a logged-in browser session on her laptop. She'd messaged herself from my account while I was presenting. She hadn't used it against me yet. I guess I hadn't pissed her off enough at the time. But she'd already planted the landmine. I walked out of that HR meeting in a cold sweat, realizing how close I'd come to having my career detonated because I liked a coworker who laughed at my jokes. Lily ended up being terminated after the investigation, and there's an ongoing legal thing I'm not directly part of, but will probably have to testify in. The scariest part isn't what she did. It's how normal it felt while I was with her. The little lies. The exaggerated stories. The way she'd retell an argument and I'd think, that's not exactly how that happened. I thought I'd dodged some mild emotional chaos. Sitting in HR holding a printout of a fake message in my voice designed to ruin my life if she ever felt like it was my real moment. Thank God we broke up. I didn't just avoid a messy relationship. I avoided becoming the villain in a story she'd already started writing for me. Story 5. When I started dating Noah, the ex was just background noise. He told me he'd gotten out of a long, intense relationship with a woman named Tessa about a year before we met. They'd lived together, talked about marriage, the whole thing. They broke up because it just got toxic. That was all he'd say. I assumed it was the usual mutual mess. I had my own ex, Jake, who I thought I'd married someday. Jake wasn't horrible, just cold and sometimes weirdly controlling. He'd sulk when I saw friends without him, made jokes about my clothes being attention-seeking, stuff like that. When we broke up, it felt dramatic and unnecessary, like maybe I was afraid of commitment. Anyway, about 6 months into dating Noah, his sister posted a photo of a family dinner. It was nothing special. Everyone around the table, birthday balloons in the back, me leaning into Noah's shoulder, smiling. She tagged all of us. I didn't even see the notification at first. I saw the text from Noah. Hey, don't freak out about the comments on my sister's post. We're handling it. Naturally, I opened Instagram immediately. Under this cute, boring family picture was a wall of comments from a private account I didn't recognize at first. Then I clicked the profile. It was Tessa. Hope you're happy replacing me like that. Ask him why he really left. Does she know what you did? Then she switched to DMs. To me. She wrote, if you want to know who you're dating, message me. I have screenshots. My stomach clenched. I'd been the new girlfriend who ignored red flags before. Part of me wanted to just block her. Another part remembered all the times I'd wished Jake's new girlfriend would ask me what he was really like. So I replied, send them. She sent photos of hospital wristbands, police reports, emails. At first I thought she was talking about him. Then I actually read them. Every single document was about Tessa. Multiple ER visits where she'd punched walls, thrown things, hurt herself during fights, a police report where she'd shown up at his work and refused to leave until security was called. Screenshots of messages where she threatened to crash her car if he didn't come over right now. And in between those, screenshots of Jake, my Jake, messaged her on Reddit, then Instagram, then text, complaining about how ungrateful I was, how I overreacted when he raised his voice a little, how I abandoned him when he needed support. Then, Jake, I think our exes are the same. They're all crazy. No one believes us. Tessa, we should tell people what they did to us. They'd been trading stories, winding each other up, building this narrative where they were the victims of two unstable, cruel partners. And now here was Tessa trying to drag me into her audience. I showed Noah the messages. He looked tired, not shocked. He pulled out his folder. Screenshots, copies of restraining orders, a long email he'd written himself in case anyone ever asked why he left. The part that made my chest hurt was this. He'd never sent it to anyone. He just kept it, in case someday he needed to prove he wasn't the monster in someone else's story. We blocked Tessa. His sister turned off comments. My friends started sending me screenshots of Jake liking Tessa's posts about surviving narcissistic abuse. For a minute, I spiraled. Was I like her? Were we actually the problem? Then I realized something simple. We left. We set boundaries. We didn't make burner accounts to scream into strangers' comment sections about people who had moved on. My thank God we broke up moment with Jake didn't happen when I packed my stuff. It happened in that comment section, watching my past and Noah's past cling to each other like shipwreck survivors who didn't realize they were the storm. I used to feel guilty for not giving Jake one more chance. Seeing him hiding in Tessa's DMs, rewriting our relationship as a horror story to an eager co-author, I finally felt something else. Grateful. Not just that I left him, but that I left before I needed a whole audience to believe the version where I was the hero. Story 6. For 3 years with Aaron, I thought my body hated me. I was always sick. Nausea, cramps, random faint spells. We blamed everything. Gluten, hormones, stress. He loved telling people I had a porcelain system. He was so caring about it too. He'd make me special meals, drive me to appointments, stroke my hair while I lay on the bathroom floor. I felt guilty all the time, like I was an anchor tied to his ankle. We broke up over something completely different. I wanted to move states for grad school. He said I was selfish for abandoning him and probably just wanted new guys to impress. I left anyway. 2 months after the breakup, I realized something weird. I hadn't been sick once. Not a little, not at all. I was eating campus food, mystery meat and pizza at midnight, and my stomach was chill. I mentioned it at a new patient appointment. The doctor skimmed my records and frowned. These episodes, they mostly happened at home? Yeah, after meals? Usually. She tapped her pen. Sometimes when symptoms disappear this fast after a major life change, we consider environmental or relational factors. I joked. Like my ex was giving me bad vibes? She didn't laugh. Like someone might have been dosing you with something. I walked out of there half convinced she was overthinking. Aaron would never, right? A few weeks later, I ran into his new girlfriend at the pharmacy. I barely knew her. Saw a few photos on social before I muted him. But she recognized me immediately. "You're Mia, yeah?" she asked. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the paper bag. I saw the label, anti-nausea meds. Same brand I used to take. We did that awkward small talk. Then she blurted, "Did you get really sick with him too?" I froze. She told me she'd started having mystery symptoms a couple months into dating Aaron. Always worse after he cooked for her. She'd found a half-empty bottle of ipecac syrup in his garage, shoved behind paint cans. When she confronted him, he said he'd bought it years ago for a prank and turned it around on her. "If you really think I'd do that to you, maybe you're the crazy one." I remembered all the times he insisted on handling my meds, measuring my safe tea, bringing me food I hadn't asked for because you need to keep your strength up. I remembered him saying, "Sometimes I think you'd fall apart without me." Standing in that fluorescent pharmacy aisle, watching another woman clutch the same prescription bag, I finally understood. I'd spent 3 years apologizing for being weak, for needing care, for being too much. But I wasn't fragile. I was lucky. Lucky I got away from a man who needed me sick to feel necessary, who might finally get caught because he couldn't stand to have a girlfriend who could stand on her own 2 feet. Story 7. My ex Rhea dumped me. That's important. For a long time I thought I was the problem. She said I made her crazy, that I provoked her, that if I didn't push her buttons she wouldn't lose control. Losing control meant throwing glasses, punching doors, once slapping me hard enough to leave fingerprints on my cheek. I never told anyone because she was small, charismatic, funny in public. I'm a tall guy. I felt ridiculous saying, "My girlfriend hits me." She left me for a bartender she met on a girls' trip, told me I was too sensitive and emotionally draining. I actually cried and apologized to her during the breakup. About a year later, I was scrolling through our city subreddit when I saw her name in a post title. He'd needed surgery. I clicked it and almost dropped my phone. Rhea's mugshot stared back at me. Same eyes, same smirk. Except this time it looked mean. The article said she'd been arrested for aggravated assault. Witnesses reported a woman smashing a bottle over her boyfriend's head during an argument, then continuing to kick him while he was on the ground. CCTV confirmed it. He'd needed surgery. There was a line about previous unreported incidents, and something in my chest went cold. 2 days later, a detective called me. "You dated Rhea Patel from 2020 to 2022? My throat went dry. "Yeah?" He asked about temper, property damage, physical altercations. I kept trying to downplay it. It wasn't that serious. I pushed her buttons too. Until he quietly said, "Her current boyfriend almost died, sir." He read off a list of injuries that sounded like a car crash report. Then he said, almost gently, "Pattern matters in cases like this. If she hurt you, we need to know." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. The memories shuffled themselves. The way she always had a story about an abusive ex. The times she'd sob afterward and say, "You'll leave me like everyone else if you see how bad I am." The bruises she gave me that I covered with long sleeves. For years I thought maybe I'd made her that way. That if I'd been calmer or more patient, she wouldn't have snapped. Hearing a detective use the word pattern ripped that lie right out of my head. She didn't get violent because of me. She got violent with me. And then with the next guy, my thank God we broke up moment wasn't dignified or cinematic. It was me on my couch, shaking, realizing I could have been the one in the hospital photo instead of the guy giving a statement. She didn't discard me because I wasn't enough. She freed me because I survived long enough to become useless to her story. Story 8. My ex Colin and I adopted a cat together, Pumpkin. Orange, cross-eyed, loud little gremlin who slept on my chest. We got him our second year together, right before things started going quietly bad. Colin slowly turned into a different person. Short-tempered, sarcastic, obsessed with the right way to do everything. I chalked it up to stress. Pumpkin became my comfort when Colin's mood filled the apartment like smoke. When we split, the logistics were messy. We'd signed the lease together. He could afford it, I couldn't. I moved into a roommate situation that didn't allow pets. Short term, I told myself. Colin agreed to keep Pumpkin until you're stable. We fought about money, furniture, who got the good pans. The one thing we agreed on was the cat. There it was. Owner, surrender, form. Reason. Ex-girlfriend abandoned cat when she moved. I put signs up. Sorry. I drove to our old neighborhood with treats and his favorite toy, calling like an idiot at midnight. Nothing. I cried for days. But what could I do? Cats run. Life goes on. 2 years after the breakup, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Hi, is this Pumpkin's owner? My heart stopped. The caller explained they were from a vet clinic on the other side of town. Someone had brought in a stray with a microchip registered to me. I drove there in a blur. In the exam room, the vet came in holding a thinner, scruffier, but unmistakably Pumpkin. He headbutted my face so hard my lips split. I didn't even care. While I filled out new paperwork, the vet casually asked, "Did your circumstances change?" The note on the old file said he was surrendered because you were moving out of the country. My pen froze. What note? He brought the old record up on screen. There it was. Owner, surrender, form. Reason. Ex-girlfriend abandoned cat when she moved. Cannot keep due to landlord. Signature, Collins. No mention of me. The surrender date was the same day. Colin texted me that Pumpkin had got out. I stared at the screen, then at Pumpkin curled on my lap, purring like a lawnmower. Colin hadn't lost him. He'd walked into a shelter, lied that I'd left the country, and handed over the only living thing that had ever loved us both without conditions. The kicker? The vet said Pumpkin had been brought in by a woman who found him behind a supermarket, skinny and matted. He'd been adopted from the shelter, then dumped again. Through all that, the outdated microchip with my name got him back to me. I used to beat myself up for leaving Colin. I thought if I'd tried harder, he'd have softened. We could have saved what we had. But looking at that surrender form, I realized something brutal and simple. If he could discard a cat like an inconvenient chair, he could have done the same with anything fragile that depended on us. Pets, kids, me. I didn't just lose a partner. I dodged a future where everything I loved was one bad mood away from being quietly handed back to the world. Story 9. My ex, Victor, always called us a power couple. We started a small marketing agency together in our late 20s. He was the visionary. I was the operations nerd who actually made timelines and budgets work. We also lived together, which meant work bled into life until there was no difference between a date night and a strategy meeting. When I voiced concerns about burnout, he'd say, "This is what it takes if you don't want to be average." Over time, his vision got fuzzier. He'd promise clients results we couldn't deliver, push invoices around, borrow from taxes to cover cash flow. When I objected, he'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was cute when I worried. We broke up after a screaming match about, of all things, a printer lease. I didn't want to personally guarantee it. He said, "If you don't even trust me, what are we doing?" And slammed the door so hard a frame fell. We untangled the relationship and the business messily. He bought me out on paper. I walked with less money than I deserved just to be free. 2 years later, a very serious-looking envelope arrived from the government. I was being summoned to testify in a case involving Victor's company. There were words like fraud, embezzlement, false statements. In court, the prosecutor asked if I recognized a stack of contracts. I recognized the templates. I'd created them. But the clients were new, signed after I left. Still, my name was printed under co-owner. My stomach nodded. Then they flipped to the last page. There, in shaky black ink, was my signature, except it wasn't. The loop on the Y in my last name was wrong. The flourish was more dramatic. It looked like someone's idea of my signature from memory. A forensic document examiner walked the jury through it. Old forms I'd actually signed versus the new ones. Pressure points, stroke order, all slightly off. Watching a stranger dissect the way your hand moves is surreal. Finally, he said. In my expert opinion, these were not signed by Ms. Ruiz. The judge looked over his glasses at Victor. His lawyer shifted. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding since our first borrowed tax payment. If we had stayed together, those contracts wouldn't have been forged. I would have been there, probably pressured into signing the real thing, telling myself I was being ride or die for our dream. Instead, I was sitting on the other side of the courtroom, grateful for every lonely night I'd spent building a tiny, boring, honest career of my own. On my way out, Victor caught my eye for half a second. There was no apology there, just annoyance. Like I'd failed him again by not being complicit enough. That was my moment, realizing the love story he told himself about us was never about us at all. It was about having someone to drag into the gray zones with him so he didn't feel alone. Thank God we broke up. I didn't just avoid a bad boyfriend. I sidestepped a future where my name was inked on his crimes in perfect, legally binding pen. Story 10. I dated Jonah from 19 to 24. We met in the college ministry of his church. I wasn't super religious, but he was kind and steady, and his family took me in like a stray. Sunday dinners, group prayers, the whole cozy package. The first red flag looked wholesome. We don't believe in doctors unless it's an emergency, his mom said once, passing mashed potatoes. The Lord is our healer. Everyone nodded like this was normal. When I got bronchitis that winter, Jonah's solution was a healing circle. They anointed my head with oil and prayed over me while I tried not to cough on the pastor's wife. When I mentioned urgent care, Jonah squeezed my hand painfully tight. Don't speak sickness over yourself, he whispered. I told myself it was just their thing. Plenty of people are weird about medicine. I grew up on Advil and annual checkups. I could balance it. Then the conversations about kids started. Not if, but when. The expectation was clear. Home births. No vaccinations. Prayer over pediatricians. When I said I'd at least want options, Jonah's father gave me a look like I'd farted in the sanctuary. We broke up after a blow-up where I said, I will not watch a kid of mine suffer because you're afraid of Tylenol. Jonah accused me of choosing fear over faith. I moved out of his parents' basement and back into a crappy apartment with roommates who bought cold medicine at the first sneeze. A couple years later, I heard through mutuals that Jonah's younger sister, Beth, had died. She was 20. I went to the funeral because grief is complicated, and I'd once loved these people. The service was a blur of hymns and speeches about God taking his angel home. No one said how she'd died. In the reception line afterward, I hugged Jonah's mom. Her face looked carved out. In the church basement, people milled around casseroles on folding tables. I ended up next to one of Beth's high school friends. She was crying angry tears. She had leukemia, the friend whispered. They wouldn't let her do chemo. Said it was poison. My whole body went cold. Later, in the hallway by the bathrooms, I saw a bulletin board covered in index cards. The church prayer list. Among them was one with Beth's name on it, dated from months ago. Believing for complete healing. No chemo. Standing in faith. Someone had written, healed in glory, next to the date she died. I stared at that card for a long time. In my memory, conversations with Jonah replayed with horrifying clarity. Him saying he'd rip any vaccine form out of my hands, his mom talking about rebuking fevers, the pastor's sermon about not bowing to the altar of modern medicine. In another branch of reality, Beth might have sat where I stood, rolling her eyes at clinic wait times, complaining about side effects, alive. In another branch, I might have been standing at the front of that sanctuary someday, clutching a tiny coffin, hearing people tell me God wanted my child home when all I'd wanted was a pediatrician. Driving away from the church, past the playground where Jonah once talked names and futures, I had my quiet, devastating thank God moment. Thank God we broke up. Thank God I walked away from a love that required me to gamble other people's lives against someone else's certainty. I used to feel guilty for not having enough faith. Now, every time I sit in a waiting room under fluorescent lights, filling out boring forms, I feel something holier than what they offered me in that basement. Relief. Story 11. When I married Lena, everyone assumed she was using me for a visa. I defended her to everyone. She was from Eastern Europe on a student visa. We met at a bar trivia night, fell hard, and 6 months later I was filling out fiancé visa forms. My mom warned me. My friends warned me. Even the immigration lawyer raised an eyebrow at our timeline. Yes, she gets a green card, I'd snap, but I get her. It's not a transaction. The first year was honeymoon highs and paperwork lows. The second year was colder. Once she got her conditional green card, little things changed. She stopped coming to my family stuff, stopped tagging me in anything online, stopped saying we when she talked about the future. We broke up after a stupid fight about nothing. Dirty dishes, I think. But everything came out. She said I was clingy and small town, and that America had so much more to offer than this life. She moved out fast, like already had a sublet fast. I was too heartbroken to notice the speed. A year later, I got a letter from USCIS. Time to file the joint petition to remove the conditions on her residency. Either we signed together, or she'd have to apply for a waiver. Lena texted me like nothing had happened. We should just sign it. It's just paperwork. We can be adults, yes? Every instinct in me wanted to say yes, to be the good guy, the bigger person. But there was this pit in my stomach I couldn't shake. Our lawyer explained that if I signed, I was basically saying, yes, this was a good faith marriage all the way through, and that if any fraud came up later, I'd be part of that story. So instead, I made an appointment to formally withdraw my sponsorship. It felt dramatic, mean. I almost didn't show up. The waiting room was packed. Crying babies, couples clutching folders, people rehearsing answers under their breath. I sat there with my sad little envelope, feeling like a villain. Then Lena walked in, not alone. She was holding hands with another guy, mid-30s, nervous, wearing a tie he clearly hated. He was white-knuckling a folder, and she was talking to him in the exact soft, slow English she used with me when we first met. They didn't see me. They sat across the room, close enough that I could hear bits of conversation. Just say we've been together 2 years, she whispered. Remember, met at language exchange. You love my cooking. We want kids someday but not now because career. He nodded, swallowing hard. And your favorite thing about me? She smiled that same practiced smile. You make me feel safe in this country. He visibly relaxed, like he'd just been told he was special. In that instant, the whole relationship reran in my head. The rushed proposal, her distant behavior after milestones, the way she always had a Plan B apartment just in case, the way she never posted me on social but always posted tourist photos. I went back to the clerk and handed over my withdrawal form with shaking hands. Are you sure? She asked. Behind me, I heard Lena giggle and say, Don't worry, baby, they just asked the same questions. I'll talk. You nod. I looked the clerk dead in the eye and said, Yeah, I'm sure. Walking out, I felt the heartbreak shift into something cleaner. Everyone had been wrong about one thing. It had been a transaction. But I wasn't the customer. I'd just been the free trial. Story 12. My ex-husband Owen and I tried for a baby for 3 years. We did everything. Temperature charts, ovulation strips, acupuncture. I peed on so many sticks I started buying them in bulk like printer paper. Every month was a cycle. Hope, sex on schedule, waiting, bleeding, sobbing on the bathroom floor. Owen was supportive in that strangely detached way. He'd pat my back when I cried and say things like, It'll happen when it's meant to. He refused to get tested at first. Said it was obviously my hormones because his ex never had any issues. I saw doctors, changed diets, took meds that made me feel like a walking mood swing. When I tentatively brought up checking his side, he got offended. So if my swimmers don't work, you'll leave? I assured him I wouldn't. But inside, a tiny part of me wondered if he'd leave me for someone more fertile. Then he did leave. Just not for that reason. He fell out of love, met someone else, whatever story you want. I walked away from the marriage with a box of fertility supplements and the quiet belief that my body was broken. A year later, I met someone new. Not perfect, not magical, but kind. When things got serious, I told him everything. The failed attempts, the tests, the self-loathing. He suggested we get checked together, just to know what we were dealing with. The fertility clinic felt like déjà vu. Same pastel walls, same crappy magazines. The doctor pulled up my old file. Your workup from 3 years ago actually looked decent, she said. Not textbook perfect, but nothing that would prevent conception on its own. I blinked. What? She frowned at the screen. Did your ex ever do a semen analysis? I laughed bitterly. He said he would. I don't know if he ever gave the sample. We had an appointment scheduled around... She clicked. Ah, here it is. He did. Different last name, same address. My stomach did a backflip. Can you tell me anything? She hesitated. Technically, it's his information, so I can't give you exact numbers. But I can tell you that, at the time, I wrote a recommendation for IVF with ICSI because of male factor infertility. I stared at her. Male factor? Severe, she said quietly. Very low count, poor motility. Conception naturally would have been extremely unlikely. I walked out of that office in a fog. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and remembered every month Owen had watched me blame myself, joke about my geriatric ovaries at 29, spiral into shame while he said nothing. He'd known. He'd sat through my tears, my invasive tests, my hormone crashes, with the knowledge that the problem was at least equally his, and never said a word, not even to share the weight. 2 months later, I missed a period for the first time in forever. I took a test with shaking hands and watched 2 lines appear like a magic trick. I didn't text Owen. Didn't tell mutual friends. I just pressed my palm to my stomach and realized my body hadn't been quietly failing me all those years. The person who was supposed to be my partner had... Story 13. Before I became a firefighter, I lived with my ex, Priya, in a small one-bedroom that slowly turned into a storage unit. She called herself a collector. I called it messy but manageable. Stacks of books, boxes of clothes she'd sell someday, 3 broken TVs for parts. I'd trip over things and complain. She'd cry and say I was attacking her and didn't understand her anxiety. Every time I tried to throw something out, it turned into a 3-hour meltdown about childhood poverty, scarcity mindset, and how I was trying to erase her. Eventually, I just stepped around the piles and told myself love meant accepting quirks. We broke up when I got serious about the fire academy. She said I was abandoning her for some macho fantasy and that real adults didn't run into burning buildings. I moved into a tiny, bare-bones dorm-style setup with other recruits. For the first time in years, I could see all my floor. About 8 months into the job, we got a call. Residential structure fire, heavy smoke showing. I pulled on gear, heart pounding, the way it always does when the address comes over the radio. Then I heard it. The street name. Her street. Smoke was already curling out of the windows when we pulled up. Neighbors were screaming, pointing. I didn't recognize the unit number until I was at the door and saw the peeling sticker she'd never let the landlord replace. Her apartment. We forced the door and got hit with a wave of heat and stuff. Piles. Narrow goat paths between towers of boxes, furniture, trash bags, all of it catching embers like kindling. Flames were eating through the far wall, racing up cardboard skyscrapers. I tried to orient myself. Where the couch used to be. Where the bedroom door should have been. Except the bedroom door was blocked by what looked like an entire thrift store. "Priya!" I shouted into my mask, even though we're not supposed to. We crawled, searching. The place was a maze of her someday projects and don't throw that aways. Shelves had collapsed, creating little pockets where someone could be trapped. I kept thinking, I slept here. I argued here. I watched Netflix here while that extension cord sparked. We finally found her in the hallway, half-conscious, coughing, a cat carrier clutched to her chest. We got her out, started oxygen. She lived. Later, after the fire was out, the investigator pointed to the origin point, an overloaded power strip buried under a tower of old magazines and clothes. Place was a tinderbox, he said. If this happened overnight, they'd be zipping up bags instead of writing a report. I drove home to my clutter-free little apartment with exactly 1 couch, 1 bookshelf, and working smoke detectors. I sat on the floor and just stared at the empty space where, in another life, there might have been boxes up to the ceiling. I used to feel guilty for not being patient enough with her mental health, for leaving instead of lovingly sorting every hoarded item. Crawling through that inferno, feeling cardboard brush my helmet and hearing boxes collapse behind me, I realized something else. I didn't leave because I was heartless. I left because I wanted a future where my biggest bedtime worry was my alarm clock, not whether the pathway to the door would still exist if the wall behind our heads ever decided to burn. Story 14. I was someone's thank God we broke up too, I'm sure. But this one's about my moment. My ex, Cam, was the most charismatic person I've ever met. When we started dating, he was between jobs, figuring things out. 3 months in, he found his calling. It was a wellness business opportunity. You already know the type. Pastel branding, inspirational quotes, photos of women on beaches with laptops. But this one was different, he swore. Not an MLM, a community. At first, it seemed harmless. He sold supplements online, did Zoom calls, reposted success stories. Then the language shifted. People who questioned the pay structure had a scarcity mindset. Friends who didn't want to join didn't believe in themselves. My stable office job was settling for mediocrity. He wanted me in, not just as girlfriend in the background, but on stage, on calls. A power couple positioned for leadership. When I hesitated, he said, "If you trusted me, you'd at least try. Or do you like being a cog?" I went to one regional event. The chanting, the crying, the way grown adults lined up to take selfies with a guy who owned 3 rented Lamborghinis. It turned my stomach. On the drive home, I said I didn't want to be part of it. He said I was choosing fear over legacy. We broke up a month later. Officially, it was, we want different things. Unofficially, I couldn't stand watching him turn into a walking algorithm of copy-pasted motivation posts. A year later, my friend convinced me to go to this massive career expo at a downtown hotel. Panels, recruiters, networking. We were weaving through booths when I saw a familiar logo on a banner. Cam's company. Curiosity won. I drifted closer. There he was on a small stage, headset mic on, pacing like a TED talker. He looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. But the room was packed. Young, hopeful faces staring up at him. Some of you, he was saying, have people in your life who don't get it. Negative partners, unsupportive family. They'll call this a scam because they're afraid to see you outgrow them. He paused, and his eyes skimmed the crowd, then snagged on mine. Just for a fraction of a second. This is your sign, he continued, a little harder. If they're not coming with you, leave them behind. Don't let small minds keep you from big dreams. A few people actually wiped tears. One girl near the front whispered, "That's exactly what my boyfriend says. He doesn't believe in me." It hit me that probably everyone in that room had a villain in their story now. Some cautious parent, some skeptical friend, some partner who just didn't want to sink savings into inventory. We'd all been rewritten as obstacles. After the talk, I watched him work the crowd, slapping backs, hugging, promising coffee chats. A guy in an ill-fitting suit asked about quitting his job. Cam said, "If you really want this, you'll jump." The net appears. I thought about the night I told him rent was due, and he said, "Stop talking like an employee. Money is energy." As I turned to leave, a woman at their table offered me a branded tote bag. "Are you ready to change your life?" she asked. I smiled. Already did. For a long time after we split, I'd wondered if I was small-minded, if I'd bailed on something big because I was scared. Standing there watching him recruit a fresh batch of believers with the same lines he'd used on me, I realized I had been afraid, just not of success. I'd been afraid of waking up one day and realizing my whole identity was tied to a lanyard and a script someone else wrote. Story 15. I was with Martin from age 23 to 38. 15 years. We weren't a disaster. No cheating, no screaming matches, no dramatic exits. Just a long, slow erosion of everything. He was a dentist. Steady, practical, loved routine. I worked freelance, then part-time after his practice took off. "So you can focus on the house," he'd say, as if the house were a baby bird and not four walls and a mortgage. There were little things. He never came to my art shows. Forgot my friends' names. Rolled his eyes when I talked about maybe going back to school. "I just don't see the point," he'd say. "We have a good life. Why rock the boat?" The boat felt less like a yacht and more like a slowly sinking rowboat. But I couldn't articulate that, so I stayed. We didn't have kids. Sometimes I wanted them, sometimes I didn't. It was hard to tell through the fog of always compromising. He said, "If we haven't done it by 35, we shouldn't. Too much risk," and that was that. I left him at 38 after a stupid argument about a lamp. I said I wanted something colorful in the living room. He said it looked cheap. Somewhere between cheap and tacky, I realized there was not a single object in our house that was mine anymore. The breakup was weirdly civil. He kept the house. I moved into a small apartment with bright yellow curtains he would have hated. Fast forward 5 years. I'm 43, working full-time at a community center, teaching art classes to kids who eat paste and call everything cringe. My friend Lisa drags me to her uncle's retirement party at a golf club because she doesn't want to be the only single person. We're doing the polite chat thing when I hear a familiar laugh. Martin. A little grayer. A little softer around the middle, but unmistakable. He's at the bar with some former colleagues. His tie is crooked. I debate hiding in the bathroom. Before I can decide, the mic squeals and the practice's office manager announces it's speech time. They call up partners, staff, families. Wives and husbands stand next to each other. Kids fidget, grandkids run around. They call Martin's name. He walks up alone. The office manager laughs lightly. "Bachelor of the group," she jokes. "Married to his work." Everyone chuckles. Martin does too, but his hand tightens on the mic. He thanks people, talks about crowns and root canals, the honor of serving the community, blah blah. Then he says, "I had a partner once. She put up with a lot of late nights and dental conferences." My heart jumps into my throat. "She's not here," he continues, "because I didn't give her much to stay for." The room goes quiet in that awkward way where no one's sure if this is still banter. He recovers with a joke about golf being his new mistress, and everyone laughs, relieved. After the speeches, I end up at the dessert table at the same time he does. Our eyes meet. There's a rush of memories. Assembling IKEA furniture, quiet Sunday mornings, arguments about lamps. "How are you?" he asks. I tell him about the community center, the kids, a small gallery that took 3 of my pieces. He looks genuinely surprised. "I always knew you were good," he says. I just thought you'd grow out of it. There's no malice in it. Just honesty from someone who never saw me clearly. He pulls out his phone and shows me photos of the practice over the years. Renovations, staff parties. In every shot, he's front and center, flanked by hygienists and assistants and later, new associates. Lots of smiling faces. No one standing next to him at Christmas dinners. No one holding his hand at award ceremonies. I figured I'd have a family here tonight, he says quietly, almost to himself. It kind of snuck up on me that I don't. For a second, guilt flares. Maybe I abandoned a good man because I wanted yellow curtains. Then I remember the years of being an accessory in my own life. The way he'd introduce me as, "This is Emma. She keeps me organized." Like I was a planner app. He chose exactly what he valued most, over and over. Control, predictability, his routines. Now he has them. On the drive home, I don't feel triumphant. Just aware. If I'd stayed, I'd be the politely smiling woman at his side, getting thanked in a speech as the person who held down the fort while he lived his real life at the office. Instead, I go back to my small apartment, paint-stained jeans, and a fridge covered in crayon drawings from kids who think my weird lamps are so cool. Martin retired with a plaque and a standing ovation. I retired from being furniture in someone else's story.